What's so funny, Dave?
The best laugh.
Here we are.
It's 1, 2, buckle my shoe.
1, 2, 3, buckle my feet.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, strain my pee for kidney stones.
Oh, jeez.
Do they have to strain it?
Yeah, of course you do. You need to find out what it's made of. You know, it's like, is it calcium oxalate? Then don't be drinking milk. Hey, everybody out there. This is David Nichtern and Duncan Trussell and me. We're hanging out, Raghu. And we're talking about David's kidney stone, which the whole of Facebook was quite aware of what was going on while it was going on, actually.
A real-time kidney stone processing by a group, a satsang.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's why we need the satsang. I've heard. When I get my kidney stone, I hope y'all are there for me.
Yeah, right. Okay. So, Duncan, I was telling David a little bit about our idea about picking up on what was our idea?
Oh, the book.
The book idea. What was the other idea?
Oh, overthrowing the government. Whatever. It's another podcast.
That was the first podcast. We got through that, though. I think we did okay with that. Oh, I hate to diverge, but as I was waiting for you guys, I saw this terrible news item. Ruth Ginsburg was just operated on for lung cancer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my God.
And I don't know if you have seen the movie RBG, rather. Have you?
Either of you? RBG?
It's a doc on Ruth Ginsburg, the Supreme Court Justice. It is fantastic. I can't more highly recommend a doc.
I heard it was good.
Yeah, and by the end of it, you're like, oh my God, please don't die. Please don't. She's all that's standing. This wisp of a woman is all that's standing between us and total destruction. Is the kind of feel you get after you watch this movie. Anyhow,
Ginsburg. That's probably why she feels bad. That must be a terrible feeling to be the thing preventing the destruction of everything.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of a load, but she'll get through it. Now, back to our little project, which is about how to deal with this constant obsession with me, each one of us. And especially in this climate, in this polarized climate that's beyond polarized at this point, the us and them. So I found something that, since we've taken this thing, Duncan and I, from Krishnadas, he wants a royalty, by the way, the movie of me, I found something.
What?
He wants a royalty for using the movie of me, his thing.
That's his thing.
Yeah.
You actually can't copyright a name, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Can you be our lawyer, actually?
I can. I've been, 45 years in the music business. I certainly can.
Yes, you can. I want to read something that he wrote that really hits to the point of what I want to talk about with everybody today. And he said, we have a completely incorrect view of things all the time, which is me as the center of the universe. The whole feeling of being separate from the universe is called Maya, illusion. The body is like a house that's been put together by temporary causes and conditions. All we know is what we conceive of with our five senses and the jumble we make out of that with our minds. These great beings are just not locked up in that room like we are. And referring to great beings, we're referring to the Buddha. We're referring to, for our own experience, he and I, Maharaji. We're locked up in the room of thought, the prison of thought and emotions. We're locked up. That's all we know. We don't see things clearly and directly without all of our filters getting in the way. We go on recreating all of our painful stories all the time. If the saints never showed us there was a way out, a different way of being, how could we know? Most people go to work, drink beer, and die, not knowing there's another way of being, a deeper love. They live and die trapped in their stuff. We want to address that at this point. We have been addressing it with various people with a number of different responses and so on. And so, David, when we were together, David and I, we were together at a friend's house and just looking over the ocean. It was absolutely a beautiful place. And we started talking, which led to the idea of us pulling together this podcast, or this chat, really more than the podcast. And it was, we're looking for some of the antidotes to this obsession, to this gigantic attachment to our story and so on. And so we look to, because we have been doing this retreat and we've been working with different Buddhist teachers and so on, we are thinking, okay, what is the real efficacy of, there's two major teachings that I thought we might talk about today. And the one, I think, David, we were talking about, was it not dependent origination? Dependent origination and emptiness were two concepts that are so highly misunderstood in my mind. And I mean by not just people who aren't Buddhist practitioners, but in general. And I mentioned that, and Bob Thurman has talked a lot about these kinds of things, and he's given a different twist to one. And I want to just throw this out to both of you to see if it makes any sense at all. Now, but first we need to define dependent origination. Can you give us a 2-sentence thing on it?
2-sentence only.
It's tracking that which arises out of causes and conditions, and seeing the arc that is given to our experience by taking those causes and conditions to be solid and real. And so we don't see the kind of evolutionary aspect of it, the change. We don't see the changes, which you could call impermanence. That would be one key point to understanding it, is understanding impermanence, that none of those are actually based on anything substantial or permanent.
So let me say what I think. Maybe, Duncan, you can say what you think. But what I understand, rather, is that we are primordially Buddha nature, true nature, and we are reacting to the input that comes in, the causes and conditions. We are reacting, and in that reaction, we are creating what ultimately is my story, my neurosis, my habitual patterns, etc. Right. Is that?
Well, just to finish through, that we're giving it substantial reality to temporary phenomenon. For example, you sneeze, right? It's sort of a simple experience, but then your mind starts working on it. You go, oh, I'm getting the flu. I didn't have a flu shot. I never did this. And all of a sudden you have a very elaborate kind of narrative going on from a kind of what could be taken to be just a simple experience.
Right. And that, to me, and now the other thing that Bob talks about in relation to dependent origination is ignorance is at the basis of it.
That's right.
Right. But what I loved about what he said was it's not, ignorance doesn't just mean you don't know something, right? I mean, that it means wrongly knowing something. And that, to me, is one of the biggest hooks, keeps us hooked into that story, because we absolutely think we know what the hell we're talking about.
And just to
one of y'all give it a simple example of what wrongly knowing would look like, just some non-esoteric, what's a classic example of wrongly knowing?
You see a piece of rope coiled up in the corner of a room and you think it's a snake.
Okay,
but worse, you could live with that. But worse is
Worse is you see a snake coiled up in the room and you think it's a piece of paper.
Yeah,
You're in trouble, man.
that's very bad. But how about you? How about you? You walk into a room and you're with various friends and so on, and you see there is something going on. Let's say between a couple. There's a
Yeah.
couple, a married couple, and you see something going on. You get
They're
a
making
vibe.
love.
No, I was thinking more like that wouldn't be the what party are you going to? Are you going to these kind of parties lately? Your wife is pregnant and everything.
If we're making up parties, why does it have to be some boring cocktail party? Like walk in a couple and with drinking cocktails. They're making love.
All right, and they weren't really making love, okay? You just projected that they were making love. Really, they were having a really hot argument, and whatever, you got it completely wrong, but you thought that you got it right by virtue of what was coming into you in that moment, which is the same as the rope was the snake.
Well, and here's just one other simple example. You go to a football game, they go into a huddle, you're in the stands, and you think they're talking about you.
Okay, great. That's good.
Well,
Or how about this classic? This is one of my favorite examples. It's so fascinating. It's those cargo cults. You know about those, Raghu? The cargo
what?
cult? Yeah, y'all ever heard of that?
cargo?
They're called cargo cults. It happened, I think it's somewhere in the Pacific Islands. There was, during World War II, some airdrops that were happening, and some of these airdrops landed on uncontacted tribes. And within the airdrops were things the tribes had never seen before, like amazing things in these boxes. And so they started repeating what they were doing that day, thinking that they had finally figured out a way to communicate with the gods and cause this kind of manna to fall from heaven. And so they have these rituals based around trying to get another box of supplies to get parachuted out of the sky. But in their version of reality, a box of supplies didn't get parachuted out of the sky. A gift was given to them from the divine. That's a cargo cult.
Huh. Wow, I never heard of that before.
Hold on one second, guys. Keep talking. I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah, I never heard of that.
Isn't that wild? It's often used as an example of the way that neurosis or superstition starts. Is that you begin to associate one kind of non-impactful variable with a result. You start connecting actions to results when there isn't any connection at all.
Right, no substance.
This produces like to use more sports examples, when you see baseball players do a weird ritual when they have some kind of series of movements they do before they swing the bat or whatever. There's for some of them, they have this real sense that there's a magical thing happening there and that they need to do these movements so that they can play better.
Yeah, you know what? I have a great example. K.K. Shah, who you guys know is Ram Dass's, it's our mentor, Krishnadas and I. And he was at my house one day. He was visiting in America, and I love tennis. So I was watching tennis. And he sat and watched with me just to hang. And you guys probably don't know, Rafael Nadal is one of the top 2 or 3 tennis players in the world.
I used to train him.
You what?
I used to train him. I was his coach a couple of years ago.
Huh. Gee, we haven't played. We'll have to play a little bit.
Someday.
Yeah. Anyhow, before he strikes the ball, he has an elaborate ritual that he does, touching different parts of his body, tugging his shorts, whatever. It's the exact same ritual every time he strikes the ball. So KK's watching this and going, wow, he's like doing puja. He's some kind of siddha. So through his whole lens, right? I mean, he's obviously just obsessive compulsive. It's Rafael Nadal. But KK, through his lens of seeing the kind of subtle movements that are made, like in puja, there's all sorts of hand movement. There's all sorts of mudras and so on. He was doing mudras, and he got a whole other picture, excuse me, of who this being was.
Yeah.
I mean, and of course, it was completely harmless. Now, most of the time that we're doing this shit, we are absolutely just creating the more support for illusion, for Maya, by thinking that we actually know what's going on.
Well, you guys are raising a really interesting point, which is what's the difference between ritual and superstition?
Wonderful.
I think isn't it in the, I go back to I guess my examples are so vivid for me from our mentors, but we had a mentor, Casey Tuar, and David, you know quite well because you hear Krishnadas talking about him all the time and how important he was to him and I and many others. And I was never one for ritual myself. And when I went to India, just even seeing the statues and everything, none of it meant, at one point, Hanuman started to mean something to me and the Chalisa and all that. But we used to go hang out with him, and he would do these pujas for like 10, 12 hours straight, not move from the place. And what he put into this ritual was so powerful that whoever he was calling on actually appeared. I mean, you knew that by just being in the vibration in the room. I mean, it was staggering. And he would go out of his conscious body. He would go into different states of samadhi. So to me, ritual, superstition, I think that it's in the beholder.
I think I have a better answer for that, if you don't mind, or not a better answer, an alternate version of that isn't quite based on the metaphysical, but it's based on the difference between people who imagine that when they, forgive me, this is a sexual example, but they're this couple making love. Let's in the room that we walked
into.
That's
all you've talked about since we've gotten on the air here. This movie.
Versions of the couple making love. One version of the couple making love, the man thinks that if he were to have an orgasm while penetrating his lover during a full moon, there is no possibility of a baby coming. That would be superstition, right? That would be superstition. That would be he would be doing a kind of ritual, I guess you could say, but the ritual would not have the result he was looking for if he was looking for not having a baby. A baby would come regardless of his idea, if the conditions were correct in that situation. Maybe another way to put it that isn't so absolutely ridiculously awful and vulgar and weird would be, imagine if I paint on my wall a picture of a phone charger or of a plug, and I carve little holes into it, and then I take my phone and I plug it into the holes I carved into the wall. The phone will not charge. This is superstition. I've done everything that looks like it would be a phone charger, but there's no electricity coming out of the wall. A ritual, you could say, would be taking the phone, putting the charger into the phone, and then plugging the phone into the wall, and then the thing is certain to charge. That would be a ritual, you could say. This is Aleister Crowley's definition of magic, is very simple, which is the process of that which we will, or that thing that you want, accomplishing that through action in some way or another. And so maybe that's the difference between ritual and superstition. The difference, it's not magic, it's not metaphysical, is what I'm saying. It's just very basic. One creates an authentic change in the world around you, and one doesn't.
What about the placebo effect, though? That can create authentic change too.
It's considered one of the most powerful effects, but the placebo effect has created change. For example, like if I sit here and I say, look, check this out, you guys, no more wrinkles, and you're looking at my face and there's still wrinkles on my face, well, then I've made something up. But if I were to suddenly transform into a younger person, something would have happened. So that's the difference. The difference is some people, they do a ritual and they imagine something has changed. And some people, they do a ritual and something actually happens. And there's, I think, probably it's probably a binary. It is an either and or, right, you guys?
Well, let's take it back to what we're talking about, which is dependent origination, which is ignorance, which is creating a story that we believe we have completely wrong view. And so that's how I take this ritual or superstition. It's about view, right view or wrong view. And so, yeah, Dave.
Well, what is it? Trungpa Rinpoche used to call ignorance ignoring. He turned it into a verb. Because in similar way to what Professor Thurman was saying, that there's some kind of active process that's being engaged rather than just a purely passive one. You're solidifying something that without sufficient evidence. But what are you ignoring would be a really interesting question when you talk about ignorance. And
Yeah.
There's two kinds of ignorance. There's the one that's the fundamental ignorance, which is you're just ignoring the nature of reality. You're ignoring the kind of spontaneous, wakeful quality that is imbued in this moment right here. You're just not paying attention to it. Then secondarily, there's ignorance as a strategy, which is part of the three kleshas, like of passion, aggression, and ignorance, where you're actually dulling out something deliberately, strategically, like passive aggression. You're kind of ignoring what somebody's saying. You're ignoring some information, some data coming in about global warming, for example. That's a strategic kind of level of continuing to substantiate the kingdom of me that you're talking about.
Cool.
Those three strategies create the kingdom of me. In a nutshell, those are the three root kleshas. There's passion, which is craving and clinging to things. There's aggression, which is pushing them away. And ignorance is just kind of dulling out. But there's this fundamental ignorance, which is actually the birth of the nidanas, or the codependent origination. And the fundamental ignorance is you're just not paying attention to things.
That's great. I love that.
And that's just not paying attention.
I like also that when Trungpa Rinpoche says ignoring, there's an action. Like you have to actively ignore. And so what I love about that is because think of all the energy that must go into ignoring the entire universe. So much pushing, so much exertion, which is why I think many people, when they talk about realization, their words that sometimes fall within that are relax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And by that means that ignorance isn't a thing that you can do effortlessly. It takes effort to ignore. And the reason you might be tired and exhausted all the time is because of that.
You haven't even got there yet. Boy, you don't know. You're going to
I don't know what.
Tired and exhausted all the time is coming to your house.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, but one of the kind of creative ways to look at the movie of me is that it is tiring, and people get slowed down, thick, heavy, and maybe they try to push their way through that to entertain themselves harder. But the basic quality, I agree with what Duncan is saying, is the basic quality is depleting. And the natural quality is it doesn't seem to be depleting. If there's a sense of ease or staying present, which is what all these people seem to always agree on, that there's a kind of rejuvenation.
Yeah. Look at like the animal kingdom. Like how often have you looked at a bird and been like, boy, that bird looks exhausted. Man, that bird just really seems wiped out. I bet that bird must be really tired. Your dogs the dogs get sleepy. There's a kind of natural quality to them, but they just fall asleep. I've seen, I don't know if you've ever had a dog that had puppies and you could see the dog, there is some kind of like tiredness there, but it doesn't seem like the quality of tiredness that you see in a neurotic person, which seems very different. And so it's almost as though there's a normal kind of tiredness, the great way you feel after you exercise, a good hard day's work, that nice sense of like, man, my muscles are a little sore. But then there's neurotic exhaustion, which seems to be more related to a kind of ceaseless ignorance.
Yeah, ceaseless ignorance.
And in the active form. Not I don't like the word ignorance only because it implies a kind of dumbness or someone's stupid. It seems insulting. I like ignoring way better because it has within it the truth, I think, of why so many people are just wiped out, man.
I think another, just to stay on this a little bit, in terms of ignorance, we have suffering. So Buddha found what the cause of it was and what the possibility was to transform it. But in this ignorance, it means that what you're engaging with from your perspective is unreal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't understand its truth in any situation. And that, that not knowing, or wrongly knowing, which to me is really, we do so much of it.
Yeah, wrong.
I think that's where we got to take in the consideration, and that's where mindfulness comes in, right? Mm-hmm. And that's for what David teaches. By the way, David's got some great meditation. When's your next meditation course in LA? Since it just popped up and we...
Well, I'm coming out March 8th to 10th.
Wonderful.
And Duncan and I are actually doing a joint workshop.
Great. So everybody's out in LA, and this is a chance to engage yourself into the actual antidote to this ignorance that we're talking about, and understand a little bit more of how everything that's flowing coming into us as phenomenon is absolutely us reacting, creates that wonderful mixed ingredient of me.
Talk about that some more, Raghu. I love that idea, like flowing into us as phenomena. That's flowing into us as, that's a really interesting thing to say. And I think the exploration of that I love exploring that. The idea of what is flowing? Where is it flowing from? What's it flowing into?
Oh,
Duncan is training what we call Madhyamaka logic.
Yeah, right.
You just dissect. Yeah. You just go, you know what? Okay, you said this. Let's just break it down.
I would love to break that down, though, because of the flowing thing in particular, because we hear flow all the time. So this is actually a multi-billion-dollar industry. Flow state.
No, we're not talking about flow states. When I mean flow is you're walking outside. You're just going for a walk with your dogs, okay? And somebody comes by and looks at you and, hi, Duncan.
Hello.
Somebody who knows you do podcasts.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, you filter. Okay, is this person going to get on me because they want an autograph, or do they want something? Or wait, I got to kind of be cool about this.
Yes.
Because, I'm me, and me is a good guy, and blah, blah, right? All of a sudden, all of these things go up. As soon as that input, that's what I meant by flow. As soon as that flows into you, whatever it may be, sound, sight, smell, arises. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So then the reactivity starts first with your mind, and then it can get into other areas. So that's what I mean around that.
But I think it's really helpful to see the nature of that reaction you're describing there as being the RGB of it, the red, green, and blue of it is passion, aggression, and ignorance.
Yeah.
You either go towards it, you go away from it, or you try to blank it out. And that's happening moment after moment after moment. And then once you do that, you create a need for a reinforced narrative to support that initial impulse.
What if you're not doing that? What would that look like?
Okay, here's what it would look like. If I have a perfect example. Yeah. If you are not reacting, that pure, unadulterated, true nature is just here. Okay, and it just remembered. It's again something from Bob's wife. They were hanging out somewhere, and somebody said, the Dalai Lama, does he do miracles and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And, Bob wasn't going to get into that, but his wife said, yes, I've seen tremendous miracle. And he said, "Oh, great." So he said, I've been in many stress situations with him, and there were many people, and everybody kind of wanting time with him, as you can imagine, and a piece of him, and a lot of things going on. He's representing the Tibetan people and the Dharma and the Buddha and so on. And I've never seen him, she said, in all of those situations, ever be with anybody where he didn't give them his complete and full attention, and that's a miracle.
Oh, wow.
Is that so great? I love that.
Yeah, I think she's right.
Yeah, no, she's absolutely right. So, Duncan, there's a beautiful example of that person would come to his holiness, and I've seen it. We've all seen it. And you just see it with him. I once saw him, and the guy that came put the headset on him. Came to put the headset on him. I'm talking at the Madison Square Garden. There was 15,000 people, and he completely turned, and he embraced without touching the guy. He embraced that guy. You could see it. So that person walking down the street to you that knows you and wants something maybe, or just wants to say hi or whatever, and mind wouldn't be there. There would be nothing but open. Actually, we see it with Ram Dass. He does it too.
I want to talk about Ram Dass for a second, because this reminds me of something that I heard from someone who had his darshan, who was a musician, and told me something I think about all the time. I really love it. He was with Ram Dass, and he said, they're out in, we give our fans our love, and they give us love back. And Ram Dass said, okay, let's stop.
Wait. Tell me that again. He said that?
He said, the musician.
The musician said, oh, okay.
And it was wonderful. It's a wonderful thought, which is like, when I am performing, I am giving my love. In this case, when the Dalai Lama is here, he is giving his attention. And I'm giving my love. And then the fans, they give me the love back. And this produces some kind of crazy feedback loop in this sort of weird love engine that is created in the concept of the giving of love and the receiving of love. But what Ram Dass said to him is, well, that's your ego, because you can give love. And the reality of the situation might be true also with attention. Because if I can give attention, so if someone was to say, oh, look at this miracle the Dalai Lama did, he gives his attention, then we have this sort of reservoir of attention that is being given and never depleted. So it's almost as though this man, in his ability to give attention, is miraculous. But what if there's no difference between the Dalai Lama and a tree, in the sense that when I'm with a tree, the tree is not giving me the tree's attention. The tree is just the tree.
Absolutely.
And that's so. In that saying of giving attention, it feels to me like there's more of a reflection of the perceiver of the miracle than a miracle, in the sense that maybe you don't have to give attention because you are fundamentally attent. You are
Yeah, right. And and there's no doing. He's not doing.
Well,
Dalai Lama's
can we
not
add a
doing.
few more like attributes then, maybe to the kind of projected? Of course, we're projecting what we think the Dalai Lama is experiencing to some extent, or what the nature of that is. But there are things said about it. So it is safe to say he's doing nothing, which is, I think, what the tree analogy gives us. It's not. There's not a kind of like conscious attempt to give attention. It's just more natural unfolding of attention. Then there's a natural flow of compassionate energy, which means that there's a non-dual connection between him and the other person, so that there's not an artificial feeling of I'm giving you my compassion even, but the compassion flows. And so he's doing nothing. There's a flow of compassion, but there's yet one more thing, which is a flow of skillful means, which means naturally arising, which can also be cultivated. He knows what to cultivate and what to destroy in a communication. So there's the four karmas there is like a pacifying, enriching, magnetizing, and destroying. And those, for a kind of enlightened type of being, those arise naturally in the flow of communication. For us, we can give it a little bit of a push. Sometimes you can go, maybe I could, dial myself down here a little bit and listen to what this other person's saying, for example. So it can be both a relative and an absolute kind of quality. And then finally, the last gateway, it's mirror-like. In other words, who knows what you're seeing? I still to this day, Trungpa Rinpoche, I'm not sure he was ever actually there. That's my last kind of final. Rather than giving him all the qualities, it was a very mirror-like experience. There's something when somebody is less active, naturally attentive, flowing compassion, naturally rising skillful means, it's almost like you're bouncing off it and getting very accurate feedback effortlessly. So there's that.
My version of that is, he was like with Maharaji Neem Karoli Baba. Oh, seemed like a computer. It was just doing what the right thing to do for everybody. There was nothing on its own that it needed or anything. It was just like that. Yeah. So the same
skillful
kind of a
the
thing.
natural arising skillful mean. But the interesting thing is you can also see those as relatively arising phenomenon, right? Compassion. We practice compassion. We practice skillful means. We practice awareness. So the idea that those are the most natural state also means you can cultivate without an insane amount of effort, but it's gentle effort. You can assimilate those until you fake it till you make it.
Yeah, cultivate. Okay, that's our byword right here, and everybody, and we're sharing with everybody. That's all we know. There is nothing else that we can do except cultivate. In terms of when we start thinking about, okay, we see how we are so wrapped up in the ignorance of not knowing reality and the ignorance of thinking we do. Okay, what are we going to do? And so that's why I love Krishnadas's thing, by the way. Without these beings who show us the way, in your case, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, by the way, if you've not heard that name before, anybody listening here, I would highly recommend that you get some of his books. They are so clear and some of the best elucidations in English or Western psychology of Tibetan Buddhism. It's just phenomenal. So Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, we're going to put links up. I mean, we talk about him all the time, but I emphasize this. Now, this is David's teacher, and he spent some great time with him back in the day. I spent a little alongside of some of our other friends. But without these... what would we be without these teachers, Dave? Where would we be?
Guitar player.
Guitar player, that's true. And you did pretty well at that, so what the hell.
I didn't learn that from him.
That's great.
I could have taught hm about that.
Yeah.
The one thing David has pointed out to me that I really like quite a lot is the earth, not forgetting about the earth, and then and the natural world. And I am reminded in this conversation, I'm so lucky to have you. You guys are my teachers, and I'm so lucky that you guys had wonderful teachers. But it makes me think of when you're talking about these teachers and these great beings. It's so easy for people to just forget about the earth and the trees and what you're talking about. So, for example, like I remember once, this is such a mundane example compared to being at the feet of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche or Neem Karoli Baba, but inner tubing, like you ever go inner tubing and you're on a river and if you just notice for a second how with zero effort, the river does exactly the right thing to push your inner tube down the river. You see that this quality is actually in a river. And then you see that the quality that many people are reporting in from humans that are awakened is already in the world everywhere. And I really like that a lot. Now, someone has to be able to talk to the river, I guess, and those would be the awakened beings so that they could give words to the river. But I think it is important to realize that we have these teachers are not just inside of people, though we need the people. Thank God for the people. It would be terrible without it. That's what I mean. This natural thing that you say is a computer, Raghu, which is a very modern way to say it. It came from
tree.
Is a river, is a tree, is the wind, is and this is in one of the great books that I'm reading now that David recommended, the warrior's, was it Shambhala, the warrior's path?
Shambhala, the sacred path of the warrior.
This is a great book. And he talks about how
it's Trungpa Rinpoche's book. Everybody.
Trungpa Rinpoche. And so because not all of us are so lucky. I didn't run into Trungpa Rinpoche. I didn't run into Neem Karoli Baba. So, and I love that Trungpa Rinpoche says, well, look at a color. Look at a nice shade of red. Look at that. Look at how perfect that is. That is perfect. Just that, the color. Or maybe the gentle, for me, I have a son coming and so I not to be cheesy, but I'll, like, sometimes I kiss my wife's neck and I say, I love
we're back to that again. Okay. This is good.
But in that tenderness, something happens in that tenderness. There's a moment of tenderness that is not me and not her. It's just this thing that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And that thing is everything. And some people become that, I guess, completely.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's back to cultivate. It's back to being aware of those moments. It's back to being aware of the going down in an inner tube down a river. It's back to just walking through a forest. These are really easy ways to connect into the natural natural being, I guess is one way to put it. I want to.
So is a kidney stone.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus! Poor Dave had a kidney stone.
No, but the point is that it's not always whimsical or pastoral. Reality has teeth.
Yeah.
Nails, So your kidney stone, that's powerful. That's, if you really want to understand like any kind of approach to awaken mind, you have to include kidney stone reality, stroke reality, prostate cancer reality, old age, sickness and death reality. Yeah. So those things are, and also somebody insulting you, and also horrible leadership, and the whole thing is a diorama of being attentive to the whole thing rather than developing a bias.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like the bias of thinking you got to go to some guru out in the forest, or like the bias of thinking you've got to go to this person or that person. It's like I think that there is a lot of convenience in imagining that there are localized moats of enlightenment that you have to make a journey to sit at the feet of, because it would be unbearable if you realized that your kidney stone was your guru. It's for some people, it's just they don't want it because they want to procrastinate it. They don't want to deal with it. They want to put it off. So it's like, no, the kidney stone, not guru. The president, not guru. The cancer, not guru. The mom die, not guru. The dad die, not guru. Guru here, guru there. And then with that kind of ignorance, hard sorted with the terrifying realization that you're always with the guru. Whether you like it or not, you can't get away. But the guru's so polite, sometimes he looks like a kidney stone, and you don't know. You don't have to deal with that. You know what I'm saying? I think for many of us, that's a really pleasant thing to imagine, that we need to go somewhere where we're not sitting.
Well, you can't go anywhere. And boy, you're a good example of it. You were just sitting around playing video games and smoking pot, whatever. I don't know what you were doing. And then you had the idea, shit, I think I'll call Ram Dass and have a chat with him. Oh yeah, that really was your idea. I mean, and David sitting around, I'm not quite sure. We did a podcast. I'm sure David told us exactly how he met Trump or how all of this happened. We each had a moment that was nature. It was natural. It was absolutely what was supposed to happen, which leads me to the next, because I do want to get this in. Because we've just talked about dependent origination and the ignorance and the not being able to see clearly by any means, and so that's one major Tibetan Buddhist, or Buddhist rather, important teaching, and then emptiness. Okay, I'll read you a little bit about from Bob. He says. There's a verse in the Samadhi Raja Sutra, which I didn't know, King of concentration sutra, field concentration samadhi, which is, who understands karma, cause and effect, will understand emptiness, which is not nothingness. Emptiness is relativity. Who understands emptiness and relativity becomes attentive to the tiniest little details. That's non-duality. And he says, because we were sitting with Ramdas, he says, non-duality, the soul being. Really great. But yeah, talk a little, David, about the common misconception around emptiness as nothingness.
Yeah, been talking a lot about that lately.
Yeah.
Well, first, the Sanskrit word is shunyata, right? Which is, been translated into emptiness. So in other traditions, it was translated differently. Like I've heard that in Chinese, it was translated as to something that would roughly be in English, the great expanse, which is a very different kind of connotation.
Yeah,
right?
Really.
So, and then there's tatata, which is suchness, just things the way they actually are, which is already emptiness because it's empty of something. So this is the thing to make it very simple for people. When you say empty, it's empty of something. It's a relative term. There's no absolute emptiness. If you would say tatata if you were speaking in absolute terms, it just is what it is. But it's empty of what? What is it empty of? And there's three things called three ignorances, which is very helpful to understand. It's empty of permanent existence, right? It doesn't have permanence. That's one of the things. So if you describing some phenomena, it's not and you say it's empty, it means it's empty of permanence. It's empty of a independent existence. In other words, it exists interdependently. So if you talk about you or me, we obviously have some sort of sense of independent existence, but not really, because the glasses that you're wearing came from your eye doctor. And, and right now, probably there's different parts of your body that have been replaced, or, you ate lunch this afternoon, everything's moving and changing. So you don't exist independently. There's no Raghu that we can find separately from that interdependent existence. And then the third one is it has no substantial or singular existence. So that's interesting. In other words, you think it exists unto itself and indivisibly so. So like if we look at Raghu again and say, is Raghu exists substantially, you say, well, there's like 30% of his body weight is flora and fauna and his other organisms entirely, right? So and you try to boil it down to the Raghu-ness or the Raghu self-identified thing, you can't find it. So it's empty of those three things. Once you've emptied those out, you don't need shunyata anymore. If you're not trying to establish a base camp for those kind of ways of looking at things, you would be more into suchness, and that's where sort of Buddhist Tantra comes into play. You start describing arising phenomena as having other qualities like luminosity, like clarity, like vividness. You wouldn't need to keep emptying it out. You're emptying it out of something that's a false idea. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is it too technical, or does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. But I think I'd like to go back to a little bit to emptiness related to what we're talking about. Me.
Yeah, me would be empty. You'd be empty of me. Raghu is empty of me, basically. If you really look at it, you can't find it.
Okay, well, stop picking on me. What about that other guy, Duncan? He's got a lot more things.
I've got lots of me. I'm filled up.
Yeah, Duncan's full of me. Yeah.
So, but here's another thing from. So the correction is not to think you don't exist. That's a mistake. Okay, that is a big mistake. Emptiness doesn't mean that. Emptiness means you are empty of any non-relational element, which is what I believe you were just saying.
Right.
Yeah, interdependent. That means you are totally.
Bob said that?
Yeah, you are totally interrelated with everybody else.
Can we talk for a moment just about what you just said?
Right.
It's a mistake to think you exist.
Well, wait a minute. Can I say one thing about that too? I mean, look, I'm here in a way as a sort of, in my ridiculously scholarly apparition, which most people who know me know that's not my main form of expression. But we have to include some of these ideas to really talk about this accurately. And one is absolute and relative truth. So we would say relatively, Duncan does exist actually as a relative phenomenon. It would be a mistake to say he doesn't exist at all. he exists in a relative. So if you take those three things, he exists impermanently, he exists interdependently with other phenomena, and he exists, in a non-substantial way, but in a kind of evolving permeation of things.
Yeah.
So Duncan does exist in a relative sense. In an absolute sense, Duncan does not exist at all. Literally, there is no Duncan.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you land on either side of the fence there. You're probably making a mistake. If you're puffing around all existing and everything, well,
That's right.
You're making a little bit of a mistake. And then if you're going around puffing around that you don't exist, get out of here. When you put a cigarette out on your hand, I think you'll exist when you feel the burn. So it's like, so that whole thing, people always, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, or this comedian some time ago, and sometimes you get around to like hardcore nihilists, and they have this like really fascinating like aggression behind their ghost story they're puffing out, because they're actually terrified to be annihilated. So they like, or they don't want to die, they don't want to not exist, so they have this real hardcore not wanting to exist thing behind it. But because they can't bear the heartbreak, they begin to subscribe to this non-existent philosophy that manifests as like this, like what Richard Dawkins said, which is so funny, which is death is the anesthesia that saves you from the pain of life. It's so cool, but he says it with this like, there's nothing to do with it, and nothing to die. You just it's gone, nothing, not even a nothing. So it's really cool when that, of course, is heaven. When someone proposes that, they're basically saying the same thing as someone who's like, if you're a good person when you die, there's streets of gold, and they've got fast Wi-Fi in heaven, and you're up there with your family just dancing, doing a jig. Yeah. And it's like, and except the annihilatory version of that is, it doesn't matter what you do. Yeah. Bam! Oblivion! Nothing that's, you're gone forever. Nothing. And that is like even better heaven than doing the jigs with the family, because now you've got this perfect nirvanic nothing. It's essentially saying all you have to do to get enlightened is hang yourself. Bingo, bam, you're there. It's awesome. And this, I think, that's I think a very beautiful thing that people imagine, that there is the possibility of realization upon the extinguishment of the human body. But I think when people say that, you have to give them bad news, which is
that is a perfect, folksy, elaborated exposition of the two wrong views, because Raghu, you're talking about view, which is really important, of nihilism and eternalism.
Yeah,
Duncan just gave a Buddhist sermon on nihilism and eternalism.
Reverend
Dunk.
The Reverend Dunk is back. All right, wait, I'm going to bring it back because we keep going out into absolutism and relativism, blah, 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 and it's not, I need to bring it back to something that's going to help us in our day-to-day moment. And I'm going to bring up another thing Professor Thurman mentioned, that this is really, I jive with this more than anything else. I think it's the most useful thing. And emptiness is the knowledge of slipperiness. Mm-hmm. Everything is empty of being stuck in anything. There's everything that is only relational. All relational things such as ourselves, body, speech, and mind are empty of any non-relational component. And that doesn't mean we don't have magnificent enlightened experiences that feel like an absolute, but it means that even they are not. But I love this beautiful analogy of slipperiness, because on a day-to-day, that's we are sticking to everything, sticking to thoughts, emotions, blah, blah, everything, the whole thing of dependent origination, we are going for it. Everything that comes sliding into us, we're grabbing onto it. So this, to me, is the most gigantic, practical antidote, if you can think about it, is empty of being stuck in anything. I mean, what do you think?
Let's give a very simple English, grounded way of saying that. Don't take yourself so seriously. How about that?
Right. That's good.
Aren't there a lot of people you would like to say that to, including ourselves?
Yeah. We just said it before we got on. You and I were talking just that, without a sense of humor. we're pretty doomed. It's what Ram Dass has represented in what he has given people all these decades, is having a sense of humor about your predicament. That to me is one of the big openings that you can make to just allowing, a shift in perspective, right?
I saw this video on YouTube last night to illustrate this point. Man, I went down the best rabbit hole. Started with Uber drivers kicking people out of their cars, which there's a whole genre now of that. And
really?
Ended.
What the hell?
Oh, watch. It's so amazing to watch, because it's just amazing, because you just see there, if you want to talk about a great mirror and a good reason to practice. Oh my God. If you want to look at a good reason to practice, watch Uber drivers kicking people out of their car. And because you see someone who's lost
it's like the sequel to the Jerry Seinfeld series.
What is that?
A coffee.
Comedians going for coffee.
In
cars.
Way funnier. I'll say this: way funnier than the Seinfeld series is to watch someone who is in the back seat of an Uber.
Yeah.
Drunk, and is being a jerk, and the Uber driver's like, "You just got to get out of my car," and the person takes on the attitude of someone like a soldier on a hill in a war. The last soldier on a hill in some war fight, about to be just going down and just a heroic blaze of bullets. In their mind, they're somehow standing up for the great justice of the universe. Somehow they're representing everything that's right, because they feel that to be kicked out of the Uber is not okay. There's been they have to pay a $5 cancellation fee, and that is not acceptable. So they choose in that moment to enter into like an epic battle against all that is imbalanced in the universe. And it is one of the most pathetic, tragic, hilarious, sad things to watch a puffed up drunk trying to save $5 while an Uber driver generally also reacts as though they were the forces of evil, because many of these Uber drivers, they've been having to deal with this, and they start popping. So the Uber driver will be screaming, "Just get out of my car!" And the drunk person is like, "You don't need to yell at me. You don't need to yell at me." So what I'm saying is, in this moment, there is a fixation on the idea of what is right and on winning some ridiculous battle. And there is such self-seriousness in the face of the most absurd and embarrassing situation. How simple to get out of the car and just call another Uber. How simple to just say, oh, even if you're right, even if the Uber driver is wrong and you're right, how simple. It's like, okay, sorry, and get out of the car. But because they're so stuck in this idea of what must be, oh my God, it's so painful for them and so painful for the Uber driver. And you see within that the agony of the world manifesting in that self-importance, and I think that is so painful. It's so painful to take yourself so seriously. Be right. The next time you're right, one thing you should look forward to. Look forward to the next time you're absolutely right and the person you're sitting with is absolutely wrong. Look forward to this moment, because this is a chance for like a great practice I've noticed, which is like, God, you are so right. You can really drive the blade right in. You're so right. You have every right to do the execution. You have every right to do whatever the thing is, to say the cutting word. You're so right. But go to the bathroom before you cut. And as you're pissing out your kidney stone or whatever, just look and think to yourself, you know what? I'm going to go back and be completely wrong here and see what happens. See what happens. Does the world end? Does everything collapse in flames? Just watch. It's the most beautiful moment when you're like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And it's so wonderful. You let go of this huge thing. Sorry, I did another sermon.
No, you gave another exposition on a Lojong slogan, which is a Mahayana training slogan: drive all blames into oneself. This is great. I think this is how we should do. We should have Duncan's commentary on Lojong, mind training, compassion mind training, and then just he raps on it for for a bit. But that's the idea of drive all blames into one. It's like take the blame, and it's transformative. It's cultivation.
So beautiful. Absolutely.
More cultivation, our byword for this chat. Absolutely.
That's a good word.
Yes, you could think of the blame as the rain and you are the field. And if it, and there's been a bit of a drought, and if some blame starts coming your way, just be so grateful, because all of that is going to come pouring into this wonderful field, and it's going to grow the most incredible flowers that you never thought you could grow. Think if a field was dead for a really long time, but it had something in it, and it had just basically given up the idea that there, and then suddenly little flowers start growing in the field. Wow, that would be a miracle. That would be a miracle for the field. And if blame is all you need to grow those flowers, well, then we are in paradise.
The last but not least here, in terms of a little bit of an antidote to the diseases that we are talking about, is compassion. And we go back to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is absolutely the emblem, and that the naturalness of his full-on attention with anybody who is in front of him is an extraordinary miracle, as far as I'm concerned, and that kind of compassion is, to me, it's an emblem of selflessness. That you just stop. You're not thinking about yourself. Now, in the relative, to me, His Holiness is in the, and this is a little bit different from what you're talking about when we talk about absoluteness and relativeness. But to me, He's not thinking. His Holiness is not thinking. It is just being. He's being with that person and giving full attention. But us little guys can cultivate this idea of compassion, and in the doing so, we start to lose. As Bob said, we get slippery, and we're not attaching ourselves to stuff. And in the doing of it, that mini me starts to fade into the background, and that's why I think I don't know what you. I haven't been with you lately, David, in terms of your talking about compassion as a real tool to cultivate, especially in terms of getting into the perspective. Ram Dass calls it loving awareness. You would call it true nature, whatever.
Yeah, well, just that there's some, again, cultivation or method involved. I mean, that's the Buddhist approach. So if you, as you were saying that, I was thinking of asking you, what do you really, really think is the difference between yourself and the Dalai Lama? What's the difference? He's a big guy, you're a little guy, as I got that out of part of what you said. But
I didn't say little guy, big guy.
Yes, you did.
You said little guys.
What's little guys? You know, there's that great Steely Dan song. It's the Bodhisattva. I don't know if it's from that one, but till the sidewalks are safe for the little guys, right? That's the Bodhisattva vow. We are not going. But no, I mean, I'm not. I don't think in those kind of terms. Actually, of I mean, being around him is to me is divine presence, and it's just being with that presence, and that presence. I am that presence. I am part. It's not a separate thing, like when we're in that thing together. If I'm hanging with any of us, in the moment that I'm sitting down on the floor and you're up there with Krishnas, and the kirtan gets into a point of where there's no self-reference. Yeah. Okay, we are just in that presence. And that's more of what I feel as far as.
But if you do enter, Raghu, the world of the real world of the Dalai Lama is a Buddhist world of tremendous amount of method and practices related to the cultivation of compassion, which he has done extensively in his lifetime and probably previous lifetimes. And so when I see somebody like that, I go, I of course you can just jump the shark and say, let's just merge into that space. And that's, more the bhakti.
That's more the bhakti
tantric kind of approach.
Yeah.
But you can also look and say, what method is being offered for me to cultivate, even to that degree, even in this very lifetime, the potential for me to express that level of compassion as well. And it's lojong. There's endless methods in Mahayana training, and they're relative. That's the important point. They work in the relative sense of me as a sort of entity that is something you can cultivate strength in. They don't just go straight to the absolute. They say, you know what, when the next time somebody is yelling at you in Uber, you could be more generous, and you could actually practice generosity. It's parameters. There's endless technology, and it could feel technical to people, but if you're talking about the Dalai Lama, that's how he did it. That's what he's recommending. So,
but I'll also say he came in and he didn't. He definitely cultivated these tremendous practices and so on. But there's another aspect that I believe is just as true, that he came in with, he's the 14th Dalai Lama, so he's came
like some kind of karmic trust fund kid from that paradigm.
Exactly. Exactly. Something like that.
That's right. That's, but I personally make a point of not seeing. When I meet people like that, I watch carefully. What are they doing? How'd they get there? How can I emulate that? How can I use that as an example? And, having seen so many great lamas, the thing that is most impressive is the compassion element. When you see the thing you said, and that's the same thing Maharaji has, I'm loving everybody. And you know what? Even if I'm feeling a little grouchy, like what Ram Dass says, I'm going to try.
Yeah.
I'm going to try.
That's the beauty.
Is cultivation the right word to use for it, or is excavation a better word?
In your case, excavation would probably be more right on. But most of us are going to use cultivation. There's an excavation and cultivation, really.
Well, I know there's a big difference. You don't cultivate, for example. You don't cultivate gold.
That's right.
Excavate gold. Yeah. And I think that sometimes the idea of cultivation, though the word thrown around all the time, it can be really quite confusing. And I wonder sometimes about that, because it does seem that the concept here is emptiness. It's really interesting. It's an interesting form of excavation, because in this case we're excavating emptiness, and that's a funny thing to be mining for. But the idea that there is an excavation happening, to me, it kind of makes a little bit more sense, and than the cultivation thing, because the cultivation thing implies this like you're growing shit. And I know I did some flowery field thing just before, but I do think there's something to be said for the idea of excavation. And this practice of meditation seems to be more of a, when I'm meditating, there seems to be more of an excavation that is happening than a cultivation. It seems like the thing that is happening through this process was always there.
But the cultivation, get rid of that word. I mean, it's just another Buddhist term. We can get rid of cultivation. How about we just say it like, we are trying to find shit that we can practice that excavate ourselves from that gigantic attachment to mini-me, our story. Let's start there. That's the most practical kind of way to say it. No?
You know what it makes me think of? When you see an earthquake, and it's this beautiful, sad, simultaneously tragic, but also quite beautiful, when people come out and they start pulling the concrete away from the building with all this intensity and passion. Imagine if there was an earthquake, and I pray that this never happens, but the Dalai Lama was underneath all that rubble. And just think of just how important it would be to dig the Dalai Lama out of that rubble. Now imagine that you're the rubble.
Where do you come up with these ideas? I mean, where do they come from?
David.
Jesus.
Okay.
They live somewhere inside of that. That's what I meant when I said, pick on him. He's got a complex variety of me's going on.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, last thing to just say about this is Abraham Lincoln quote. So for the new book I have coming out this fall, Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck, I'm quoting somebody at the beginning of the chapter.
Wait, what book?
I have a new book that I finished that's coming out in October called Creativity.
In 2019.
That's right.
Okay.
Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck. It's sort of a practical guide.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
But so each chapter has a quote from a manifestor. So here's Abraham Lincoln, who you might never have thought of as a guru before this. But he said, if I have 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe.
That's great.
That's it. Okay, that's a closer, Dave.
And that's Duncan is an axe sharpener. That's his. We playfully gave him a nickname of blazing Vajra sword, because Prajna sword, because he likes to look through and distinguish between things. It's very valuable because you can clarify the meaning by digging in that way, by sharpening the sword. So that's one way. And the other way is the devotion. Those are the only two real paths I know, is prajna and devotion. Those two, sharpening the prajna and opening the heart. Yeah. And between us, we have all of it going on.
Yeah, this is it. We got it all.
We got it all
going on.
Of Dharma. It's so beautiful in a way that we're all together. It's very special.
It really is so great. So great. I thank you guys for hanging out here with me. And just us being able to do, forget everything else. Just, wow, we can sit here and do this. Otherwise, I'd be out wondering, God, it's snowing here. My Lord. What am I to do? So we're going to have David's weekend in March. We're going to have links. Dave, you're going to send me a link to that.
With David and Duncan together.
David and Duncan together.
We like, for whatever reason, we like chatting like this.
I love it. And I'll try. I would love to try and get out there. I'll try and get out there.
That would be amazing, Raghu.
Yeah.
And then there's also a mindfulness meditation teacher training program at the same place, which is Samarasa Center in Echo Park, LA. That's going in June to October.
All right. Well,
we'll get anybody in LA, and if you're in LA.
Such a great teacher. I'm so lucky, Raghu. This is your fault, Raghu. This is all the many great things in my life are your fault, Raghu. But you connected me with David, and then I started working with him as a
it's so great
teacher, and it's so wonderful. And so if you guys definitely go to his courses,
David, do you think in March you could? I think ordaining Duncan in March. Reverend Dunk. If you could do a public ordination then, though.
Well, listen, one of my friends asked me this. Is it Duncan Trussell or Drunken Tussle?
Ouch. Okay.
Talk about co-emergent wisdom. There you have it.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time on Mindrolling on the Be Here Now network. And Dave, we need a couple of talks from you to get up on the network too. Yeah. So please record what you're doing so we can do that. Okay.
We love you, Raghu. Really, you're doing a great job at bringing people together. It's so terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Duncan.
Thanks, y'all. Good chatting. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Ram.
Ram.